We begin with news of a historic meeting in the making. White House officials confirmed the American president accepts the idea of meeting with North Korea's leader by May. Donald Trump is tweeting, "Great progress is being made." And South Korean delegates made the initial announcement at the White House.
I told President Trump that in our meeting, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said he is committed to denuclearization. Kim pledged that North Korea will refrain from any further nuclear or missile tests. He understands that the routine joint military exercises between the Republic of Korea and the United States must continue.
Jong is the head of South Korea's National Security Office. He and his team briefed Trump about what they discussed with Kim in Pyongyang this week. Trump tweeted that Kim talked about full denuclearization with the South Korean representatives and not just a freeze. He added that sanctions will remain in place until an agreement is reached. Now, if a Trump-Kim meeting goes ahead, it would be the first between the leaders of the two countries. There are no details on exactly when or where it would happen. Tensions over North Korea's nuclear missile programs have fallen since the North's involvement in South Korea's recent Olympics. Earlier, Seoul said the North declared it would have no reason to possess nuclear weapons if the safety of its leadership can be guaranteed and military threats against it removed. The North also reportedly said it won't conduct further nuclear or missile tests as long as communication channels are kept open. Well, Japan's prime minister says he welcomes the news.
Earlier, I spoke with President Trump on the phone. North Korea said it will start talks on the premise of denuclearization. I highly appreciate the country's change in position. It came as a result of cooperation between Japan and the U.S., as well as strong pressure that Japan, the U.S., South Korea, and the international community have put on North Korea.
Abe also says he wants to visit the United States next month to discuss the issue with Trump. A leader of a group of Japanese abductees' families says a summit between the U.S. and North Korean leaders will provide a great opportunity to resolve the abduction issue. Shigeo Iizuka's sister, Yaeko Taguchi, was abducted in 1978 and taken to the North. Iizuka and other abductees' family members met President Trump in November last year. During the meeting, President Trump told them that the U.S. will make efforts to have the abductees returned to their families. Iizuka said he hopes the U.S. president will take up the abduction issue during the planned U.S.-North Korea talks, in addition to discussing nuclear and missile issues. Iizuka also called on the Japanese government to work to bring back the abductees as early as possible. Earlier, our colleague Kyoko Tashiro spoke with NHK World's correspondent Yoshiyuki Aoki for his take on the surprise announcement.
It seems like the situation is changing so rapidly. How did we get here?
No one expected this to happen. The rocket man Kim meeting the mentally deranged Trump. It was just a few months ago, the two were exchanging threats and insults. But things have changed since the start of this year. Kim has shown a more diplomatic approach. He sent high-profile delegations to the Olympics and has met with South Korean officials. And now he'll meet with Trump.
It's a sudden turn of events.
That's right.
What do you think Kim's end goal is?
That's what everyone wants to know. Pyongyang said it has no reason to possess nuclear weapons if military threats are removed from the Korean peninsula. That would mean the withdrawal of U.S. forces from the south. But Washington and Seoul shows no signs of doing that. They even have joint drills scheduled next month. And on the other hand, it could be an attempt by Kim to buy time to develop his weapons programs. North Korea boasts that it has become a nuclear power, and just a month ago says it now has an intercontinental ballistic missile capable of striking anywhere on the U.S.
We know that the North has faced rounds of sanctions from the United States and the United Nations over its weapons programs. How much do you think those elements played in this development?
The U.S. and Japan have been pushing a maximum pressure campaign, as you know, and this meeting between Trump and Kim may be an indication it worked. There have been reports that the North's economy has been hit hard by the sanctions, especially since China stopped trading with the North on a large scale. But I don't think sanctions led to this meeting. The North has other ways to obtain to what it wants, whether it's through cyber attacks or ship-to-ship transfers. But still, this announcement caught many by surprise, especially the Japanese government. It will be looking for an explanation from the South Korean envoy when he comes to Tokyo next week.
All right, now let's bring in Kim Chanju from our Eye on Asia team. Chanju, let's hear the reaction from South Korea.
Well, Minori, the reaction has been very explosive since this morning, and the official level, it's definitely positive.
We expect that the recent series of meetings will create important momentum towards denuclearization and stable peace on the Korean peninsula.
Eugene added that Seoul and Washington are cooperating closely on the matter. Other political parties in the South welcome the news and are expressing hope the emerging mood will help address the nuclear threat. Of course, it's getting a lot of attention in the media and in the public. Many are speculating on whether the upcoming talks will be a turning point for the two Koreas. And it looks great for Moon Jae-in's government, which is getting a lot of praise. Now we have a guest from Seoul. James Kim is an expert on security issues and is a research fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Mr. Kim, thank you for joining us today. Well, first of all, Trump's come a long way, as you know, from threatening the North to being cautious about talks. So why do you think he now agreed to meet Kim Jong-un?
Well, it's important to keep in mind that the U.S. policy has always been to apply maximum pressure while keeping the engagement channels open. And the president has expressed a willingness to sit down and talk with Kim Jong-un in the past, provided that North Korea agrees that the talk will be about denuclearization. The latest announcement suggests that the North Koreans have accepted this this offer. And so to some extent, I think the U.S. would like to explore further whether the North Korean intentions are in fact genuine. And we don't know whether the North Koreans, in this particular case, country like North Korea, what their intentions really are until we sit down and talk to them. So to some extent, I think there's a desire to explore a bit exactly what the North Korean intentions are, and if it is in fact denuclearization, to reach some sort of an agreement about that. This, along with the fact that President Trump really doesn't have many high-ranking officials at the working level to really represent the United States. We don't have an ambassador yet that is formally appointed in Seoul, and the last special representative for the North Korea policy in the State Department just retired recently, and that position hasn't been filled. So really, there's no high-ranking official at the working level to really play a mediating or preparatory role leading up to the proposed summit in May. Finally, President Trump has at least two opportunities to test and see what North Korean intentions really are. Next month, towards the end of this month and early next month, we have the joint exercise here on the Korean Peninsula involving the U.S. and South Korean troops. We'll have to wait and see how the North Koreans respond to that. And finally, the Inter-Korean Summit, which has been proposed for the end of April, whether that occurs and how that proceeds.
Right.
All of these, I think, will play a role.
Well, a lot of experts have thought the North's goal was to be seen as an accepted nuclear power and for Kim to defend his position with those weapons. But he's now talking about the possibility of fully denuclearizing. So what do you think is behind Kim proposing talks, and what is he hoping to get out of it?
Well, on the one hand, a lot of experts and the chatter coming out of North Korea suggests that the crippling sanctions are really having an impact. that the regime is running out of cash, and it may very well be out of cash by the end of this year. Prices of certain goods like gasoline have been going up. So really, I think the regime feels somewhat of in a squeeze, that the pressure really has been affecting the regime's calculus. But on the other hand, Pyongyang also wants other things here. They would like a peace treaty with the U.S., reopening of diplomatic relations, a normalization of diplomatic relations between Washington and Pyongyang, as well as maximally a complete withdrawal of the U.S. troops, potentially, and reunification of the Korean Peninsula under Pyongyang's terms. Obviously, these last demands probably are not going to be a starter for the United States. So we'll have to see what North Korean demands really are when they sit down to talk about these things.
It's certainly hard to know. So knowing that motivation from the North and from the U.S., what do you think will actually come out of the summit?
Well, we're cautiously optimistic here. We have a history when it comes to North Korea on these kinds of talks and agreements. We've had at least two agreements in the past, in the '94 agreed framework and the 2005 joint statement. Both have failed to resolve the North Korean nuclear crisis. So I'm somewhat skeptical that a lot of this will lead to any kind of measurable impact.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kim. And that wraps up Eye on Asia, and back to you, Minori.